best musician? Three-year-old man?
This one is right. This is July 24th. This is for August 14th, down in the note section.
Oh, this is.
So that's. I haven't heard that one yet.
Previously delivered too soon.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Mern, you mentioned the poster too. We can look at it afterwards.
Welcome, everyone, to the Gloucester Unitarian Universalist Church's worship service. I'm Mern Sibley, and Roger Garber, can you see Roger? Yeah. We're running the service today, and we're happy to see you here. And whether you're attending our service live here or watching us on YouTube, whether this is your first visit or your 50th visit, it's our pleasure to share with you our message of hope for a loving and inclusive world for all people. As a welcoming congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Association, people of all sexual orientations and gender expressions, of all races and nationalities, all abilities or disabilities, are welcome here and in our church community. And we do have a few announcements this morning. First, before I forget, there's some nice photos, 2 images that we thought were pretty beautiful from the James Webb Space Telescope that if you missed them on the way in, please take a look on the way out right in the entrance hall. And they have informative captions as well. Our big announcement is that for those of you who don't know, our regular minister, Janet Parsons, will be coming back on August the 7th, and we're very happy about that. Happy to have her with us again. Although I think we've been managing okay in her absence, so that's good too. The Garden of Isabel Sloan is the next one on the garden tour train. Isabel would like to welcome you to her colorful and usually breezy deck on Saturday, July 30th between 10 o'clock in the morning and noon. And she lives in Magnolia. I think the address is in the newsletter. I'm not sure. Okay. And importantly, the Board of Trustees would really like to beef up our volunteer corps for maintenance projects around the church. There's lots of different things to be done. If you're interested, please let Kate Ruzecki know. You can find her contact information if you talk to her today, or find her contact info in the church directory. So I think that's all my announcements.
service today remind us that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to many human communities, and to each other. We gather here today to rekindle our appreciation and gratitude for one community, the community that includes both scientists and the others who, quite apart from their daily business, seek to witness and record the truths of creation. We gather so as to shine our own lights on creation, so it is not lost in the shadow of forgetting, inattention, and fretful rumination. Come, let us attend to the miracle of existence. Our first hymn, number 79, no number tallies nature's up.
Thank
In the Unitarian Universalist faith tradition, we enter into worship with the kindling of our chalice. The chalice represents the embrace of this community holding us, and the flame represents our search for meaning, justice, and love. We take a moment now to affirm the covenant that we share with one another, which is printed in your order of service. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. Life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and the mysteries of this great gift. Okay. As we've been doing in recent weeks, we're lighting also a peace candle to commemorate the non-peace that we see in Ukraine.
Next, we're having a responsive reading, number 445 in the gray, the hymnal you were just using. And please read the italicized portions in the hymnal. 445. It's called The Womb of Stars. The womb of stars embraces us. Remnants of their fiery furnaces pulse through our veins.
We are of the stars, the dust of the explosions cast across space.
We are of the earth. We breathe and live in the breath of ancient plants and beasts.
Their cells nourish the soil. We build our communities on their artificial base.
Our fingers trace the curves carved in clay and stone by forebears unknown to us.
We are a part of the great circle of humanity that gathered around the fire, one heart, we all.
We gather anew this day to celebrate our common heritage.
All of gratitude, all that is given us earth.
Let us take a moment now to breathe, to close our eyes in silent meditation. Recall now the way the night sky has sometimes brought you peace, renewal, revitalization. Recall the times you have looked up at the stars and unexpectedly perhaps found there a feeling of hope and purpose. Keep that sky in mind, in your mind's eye. Recall the person that at one time showed you how to hope. Do you see their face? Can you see their face in your imagined sky? Picture it there amid the stars. And when you've seen these things, breathe and rest under your own miraculous night sky, now in silence.
So we have a little change in the program. I know it says something about Robert Frost, the star splitter. Instead, I'm going to share with you a reading from a writer named Lauren Isley, who's a 20th century writer who wrote about a lot of very large thoughts. The venture into space is meaningless unless it coincides with a certain interior expansion, an ever-growing universe within, to correspond with the far flight of the galaxies that our telescopes follow from without. The journey is difficult, immense. We have joined the caravan, you might say, at a certain point. We will travel as far as we can, but we cannot in a lifetime see all that we would like to see or learn all that we would hunger to know.
Each week, we gather in the sanctuary to be sustained by our community faith, to share, to explore, to celebrate, and to mourn together. We also carry the work beyond these walls as well by offering all of our different gifts in service of the wider world. Our congregation is one of 1,000 Unitarian Universalist member congregations, each entirely self-supporting, each offering its unique gifts. To support this community of caring and all of its work, this morning's offering will now be gratefully received. Blessings upon the givers and upon the gifts. So, looking up, our ancestors saw the play of gods and demigods directing events here on earth. Their imaginings included stories about what they saw, of course. They saw groups of stars, and in some of the groups they imagined lines connecting the stars, the lines forming shapes that were called characters and animals in the stories, myths, and dreams they used to explain the way the world worked. One such shape or constellation resembled a swan, or in the Latinized Greek, Cygnus. Cygnus rises up overhead in the summer. You'll have seen it. Another constellation recalled for them the hunter Orion, demigod son of Poseidon. The Orion constellation begins its hunt over the night sky in the fall. It's sort of the herald of winter. Yet another constellation, Gemini, becomes prominent during the winter over the northern hemisphere. It's visible the entire night in December through January. Gemini comes from the Latin meaning twin, and it is associated with two twins, Castor and Pollux. Castor and Pollux were twins with different fathers. By the way, I learned that this is a formal Latin, there's a formal Latin-rich phrase for this condition. called heteropaternal superfecundation. So that won't be on the test, but it's a good thing to know, I think. It's a real thing. In the Greek story, Pollux was immortal. His son of Zeus. Castor was mortal, son of Sparta's king. How that happened is another story. Pollux asked Zeus to let his brother share his immortality. Zeus accommodated them by setting both of them in the night sky forever. That's the kind of thing Zeus did for us. Gemini contains 85 stars visible to the naked eye. Its brightest star is Pollux, of course, the original immortal son of Zeus. The second brightest is Castor, the mortal brother. So I've been linked to Gemini myself. My father worked in the 60s era NASA program called Gemini that sought to learn how to do long-duration space flights, of all things. The method involved building a spacecraft that could accommodate 2 astronauts, our modern Castor and Pollux, I suppose. I think I was closest to my father in those days. He shared with me the literature about the project and samples of the materials he created for it. We were both excited by what we saw. One of the things he brought home, I remember, was a miraculous kind of a honeycombed aluminum that was used as the heat shield on the reentry vehicle. I used to sort of play with it. It was very cool. He also learned a bit about fuel cells because, among other technical achievements, Gemini 5 was the first manned space vehicle to use fuel cells to generate electricity. As all of you know, fuel cells convert energy from fuel, such as liquid hydrogen, into in a chemical reaction with oxygen to produce electricity and water. For a middle school science fair project, my father suggested that we try to construct a fuel cell ourselves, and he called the science supply companies and did all that legwork and got me the materials, and I put together this thing, soaking a fine, I think it was fiberglass mesh in the electrolyte, adding the metal connectors, made a frame out of glass, and connected the things to tanks of oxygen and hydrogen. And lo and behold, the thing worked. It was astonishing. It produced voltage. So we were both very excited by this. The science fair project wasn't very pretty. It basically consisted of a glass disc with some wires coming out of it and gas tanks attached to it and a voltmeter that showed you a reading. Wasn't much, but and we didn't get a ribbon, alas. But I think only my father and I found it exciting. It did teach me a little bit about electrochemistry, and it brought my father and I closer together for a time. Later, after his work shifted to supplying government arsenals with materials for the Vietnam War, we drifted apart. My father supported the war, and I detested it. I was living under the shadow of the draft and convinced that the war was a moral and practical disaster. It seems now that Project Gemini and our fuel cell represented a fleeting period of mutual understanding.
As you've probably seen in the media, the James Webb Space Telescope has begun sending us pictures of new constellations, new galaxies. The telescope was launched on Christmas Day, 2021, and arrived at its final position in January of this year. It's there right now, perched about 1 million miles from Earth. In the last few weeks, we've begun to get images from its camera, pictures of the most distant objects humanity has ever seen. And so what can we expect to see from this powerful eye 1 million miles from Earth? In a sense, we can see nearly everything, everything there is and everything that has ever been. The telescope is placed to study our near neighbors, planets in the solar system. It will provide data about the comets and icy bodies that lie in the outer reaches of the solar system that might contain clues to our origins on Earth, to the dynamics of planet formation, planet evolution, and the suitability of planets as habitats. One of the early images from the telescope is of a galaxy cluster named, this is not a pretty name, S-MAX 0723. It's a picture teeming with thousands of galaxies, each containing billions of stars. The light from SMACS was emitted 4.6 billion years ago, only reaching the telescope in the last few weeks. That is to say, looking at SMACS is looking back in time to a moment just before our planet came into existence and 600 million years before the first single-celled organisms appeared on Earth. In the last week or so, the telescope has provided images of a new galaxy named now GLASS Z13. At 13.5 billion light years away, GLASS is only a bit short of the theoretically farthest point that can be seen by any current or future telescope. Looking further would mean looking at things that existed before the Big Bang, but that means doing the impossible. Looking at things before things existed, before space and time and the laws of physics came into existence.
The James Webb Space Telescope joins other telescopes that together observe several types of radiation in space. Most of these are launched into low Earth orbit, about less than 1,200 miles from our planet's surface. Of these, perhaps Hubble is the best known. You've probably all seen images from Hubble at one time or another. This is especially popular because, of course, it shows us images in the visual spectrum. Other space telescopes, in contrast, observe gamma rays, X-rays, or infrared. The Webb telescope is one of the latter. It sees infrared light. Infrared radiation is associated with heat. It turns out that everything produces infrared radiation. You guys right now are producing infrared radiation. If I could see that way, that would be cool. So each of us is both a thing reflecting light as well as a thing emitting radiation and a certain kind of light in that spectrum. So this little light of mine is a song that has another kind of special meaning in the infrared spectrum. By measuring the wavelength of infrared radiation, we can know the temperature of distant stars and their outline and composition. The cool things about seeing in infrared is that you can see right through dust. And there's a lot of things astronomers would like to look at that are obscured by dust in space. The Webb telescope can show them, and us, those things. Unlike my fuel cell project, the Webb telescope is a marvel of engineering, representing the solution to innumerable, impossible-seeming challenges. In order to see, for example, the farthest infrared heat signals from distant galaxies, the telescope had to be kept as cold as possible. And by cold, I mean really, really cold, 400 degrees Fahrenheit below zero, about as cold as you can be. And that's despite the fact that the surface of the telescope facing the sun would be 500 degrees hotter than that. Engineers developed an ingenious heat shield and heat pump to basically maintain that differential. Just remarkable.
And then, in order to actually get the resolution to see these faraway objects, the telescope's lens needed to be enormous, over 270 square feet in size. But, of course, if it was built as a single large mirror, it would be much too big to fit inside a rocket and get launched into space. So the remarkable solution that the engineers came up with was a mirror that consisted of 18 hexagonal segments that could be separately focused to create a vast combined image, similar to the compound eye of a honeybee. But unlike the bees, the eye of the Webb's telescope had to be foldable. It was folded, concertina style, into the small space that was allowed in the rocket payload area. And once in space, the lens could be unfolded and its 18 segments individually focused by motors that can position the segments to within 10 nanometers accuracy. So for comparison, a human hair is about 60,000 nanometers. So that's pretty accurate. All this is really a remarkable testament to the abilities of humanity to solve hard problems. Such solutions to problems like this represent many convergences. So each of those engineers and scientists working out these solutions was once a kid who encountered a parent, a teacher, or another adult who started them down a road of solving such problems. Someone who helped them with a math problem or a writing assignment or even maybe a fuel cell project for the science fair. The children, the adults, along with the distant nebula brought into focus by astronomers, these are one constellation of lights.
The James Webb Telescope is named after the person in charge of NASA during the time that my father worked there on Project Gemini. This is the constellation Gemini that connected me with my father, James Webb, and perhaps the telescope itself.
The sky has always been a canvas on which we project pictures of who we are, from whence we've come, and where we're going. Many people first learned to navigate the vast oceans using celestial observations and calculations. They imagined lines between the points of light they saw in the night sky, and they saw figures in the lines: Hercules, Hydra, Draco the dragon, Pegasus the winged horse, Centaurus the centaur. These constellations of theirs testify to the astonishing mystery that the universe is the kind of thing capable of producing both stars and stories. Constellations made from a compound of cosmic fires, dust, and rock, along with human purposes and human perceptions.
So how did the constellations arise? And how did we come to be here? Some part of the answer will come from our efforts with telescopes to see far into the distance back in time and space. Other parts, though, will come from looking inwards into the minds that project their images and stories across the sky. Because the spaces we're exploring to look for answers to those questions I mentioned can't be found simply by looking outward, away from our own existence. We're also explorers of interior space, the place our minds fashion for ourselves, the space we find when we look into the eye of a friend or lover, or look into ourselves with our mind's eye. This space requires not a telescope, but another kind of instrument, the common eye of humanity that looks inward and finds there the motives and means for human cooperation, compassion, community, purpose, and meaning. So we're looking up, but we also look inward. And we mix all these points of light in a confusing, beautiful constellation made of stars, poetry, songs, galaxies, acts of kindness. And we can't do otherwise, because the building of constellations is the business of the universe, its fundamental principle. The principle has been known for thousands of years. It's called love. And love does, after all, cause the world to go around. Our next hymn is number 331, Life is the Greatest Gift of All. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. And now I invite you to hold up, those of you at home who might have your candles, to hold up your candle, and here we'll get ready to extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Go your ways, know not the answer to all things, yet seeking always the answer to one more thing that you know. Amen. Thank you.